So the thing to talk about next, more than anything, is the term meta. Because if you are joining us, well, how we position on stream is that we're very much like people who are weekend warriors like ourselves. Like we're not winning tournaments. We're going mid tang. We love the hobby, but we're not here. We don't enjoy the tournament side. Like we're not trying to win tournaments with certain lists. And the term that you will hear when you join it is meta. You'll talk to players and they refer to it as meta. And sometimes it's derogatory, is that they refer to a player as a meta player. What we want to do is talk about that, what it actually means, and how you should not how you should refer to it. What do you actually make of that, and what the types of meta that actually exist out there. The first question, I guess, for you guys is, when did you first become aware that meta was a word on the scene? Was there a time where you were like,
Mm.
okay, Ben, what for yourself? When was it? When you
Oh,
when,
yeah. Yeah, no, it's quite an interesting one. I think I first understood what just the word meta was, but when I first got into the hobby, I spent lockdown painting a few models. I like the painting side, and then accumulated a load of plastic. And my wife was like, "What are you going to do with that?" And I was like, "I best play with it." And I passed on my plastic crack addiction to one of my best mates down in London, and him being him, this is Elson part of the Rusty Nukes, rather than actually organise a normal club friendly game, our first real taste of any sort of games where we had to know the rules was the London Open. So before we'd actually completed any normal games following the rules, we were thrust right into the London Open. So my first real scope of what meta actually was people which know what they're doing with what they've got. I think the term was wrong in my head, and I've been using it recently until we started reflecting back on something you raised, Mike, about what do you mean by that? And I thought, no, it's people which know what they're doing with their armies, and they can make a good army, make a bad army good because they're a meta player. There is meta lists, there is meta chasing as well. I think how you classify the word meta, you got meta players, meta armies, and meta chasing. That's what I think to start
yeah,
with.
I think yeah, absolutely. I think I would agree most with that. Paul, what about yourself?
So my first experience of the actual discovering meta was actually watching the Honest Wargamer stream, and he does like on Mondays he kind of goes through the list reviews of who did well and everything, and ultimately seeing these lists come up time and time again, and the term meta was being kind of thrusted out and about, was when I really kind of came to understand in my way of what it meant to be meta. I've only ever really fought against two or three opponents who I would be classed as meta, and like Ben has said, I think he covered it really well with the idea of a meta individual is someone who not only really understands the game and the landscape, but also understands the rules of the army they're playing with and how to maximize the potential from those rules. From an army perspective, a meta army is something that is considered to be either not necessarily the term broken is used, but it's not so widely out there, particularly not at this point now. But it's an army that has capability of producing guaranteed results with minimal effort by the individual controlling them. Now, to say that though, you do need to have a confident player behind them to ensure that they maximize the potential of that army. But that's how I kind of see the term meta coming into play, particularly as we're moving towards the end of 3.0. And looking forward towards 4.0, it's become more mainstay in the competitive environment as the competitive environment has grown tenfold over the last 3-4 years as we've come out of COVID. Seeing that there are people out there who do have a brain and do have a level of intelligence who know how to play this. You only have to look at some of the BCP rankings or the other rankings that we have around and available, and you have people like Owen Jackson, Dominic Stonebridge, just to name two, who can quite comfortably pick up an army and then go and take it to a tournament. they may have only played of it once or twice, and they can still go 4-1, 5-0 because they've understood how to use it. So that's how I've seen and understood meta at this point.
Yeah, unfortunately for me, my introduction to the term was negative. It was at my first tournament. I went with Slaves of Darkness, and I was comfortably on the kids' tables. The first person I played was an IDK player, trashed me. Of course he did. Second guy was a OBR player, their old one. And we were talking about it after, and he had the match before me. He had drawn a shooting army, basically, and he said like he out of round two, he said I conceded. There's no point. I was having no fun. I was just moving stuff. He's just picked up a meta army, and that was the arbitrary. Because what he was trying to, not what he was trying to say, what he was saying is that the guy, his opinion was that army was very, very strong. So that's why that army was there. It wasn't because the person liked Stormcast, it's a Stormcast shooting army. It wasn't because that person had been practicing with it. It was because someone had gone out and just picked up what was strong. And we do get that, and we'll talk about meta chasing. So that was my introduction to it. And then I heard it quite a lot. And I have used it. I'm not throwing stones at it. I have used it wrongly and not realizing how dismissive it could be to someone who has played an army for a long time. Because we have the meta flow, which is big in Games Workshop. So that was my introduction to it. And as you said, Ben, we were talking relatively recently about the reflecting on, well, when we say meta, what do we mean? Because meta, by its standard, just means your army essentially knows the rules of the game. It knows itself. That's what it is. That army, it knows that we're in a magic meta at them. We're in a magic book. So all the wizards have turned up. It's a meta army, which is a kind of a weird way of phrasing, but that is kind of what it means. And I was talking, the conversation came up because of us played Richie, who's an ex-Team England captain. He's an ex-England captain. We were talking about meta. I use the term meta with him, and then quickly apologize. I don't mean meta in a negative way. I just mean it's a wizard army. We're in a wizard THP. But we also should get into the point of apologizing for using things when we recognize that some stuff is better. So the next one about is meta flow. The meta changes all the time, sometimes for the good and sometimes for the worse. In your time, what are the armies you have seen bounce around the most in meta? I'll start with you, Paul, as a Gits player.
Why would you suggest such a thing, Michael? Ultimately, there comes an element of power creep in this, and there's a bit of discussion around that as well, as whether or not power creep really exists in the game. In my personal opinion, it does, because Games Workshop wants to sell the books, they want to sell the miniatures. So what do? They have to give that book a one-up edge against everything else that's out there. So in terms of the armies, though, yes, you're right. When the Gits came out, Gloomspite Gits came out, there was a meta build in there where you just took squig herds and a couple of squig bosses and you just let them loose and everyone got mortal wounded off the board. There have been setups with Morathi and the bow snakes, as commonly referred to, where you would have Morathi snake ladies with bows. Morathi will allow them to shoot in hero phase as well as in the shooting phase, and you just shot the opponent off the board. KO also had it when their book came out, and it was kind of like, we just take lots and lots of Thunderers, pile them into boats, and then you shoot the enemy, and then if you really want to, you pile drive one of your frigates into the enemy, and then they get additional buffs when they go into combat. You had Lumineth Realm Lords, where you have Techless build or the Techless Castle build. You have Techless, you have lots and lots of Sentinels, and they all do their own spells themselves, and then they're just fishing for 5s and 6s on the hits to do mortal wounds. It's this sort of thing that I've experienced or I've seen out there, which kind of could fall under that whole meta, because it's an easy to win kind of solution for a player who perhaps doesn't want to work hard for it.
Yeah, you touch on quite an important aspect of this, and I will come to you shortly, Ben, is that the working hard part is, I think when we played the opponent we want to play, we want to know they have put as much effort into their list as we have put into our list. And we don't want to think that they have just gone on to, or to put it in real simple terms, they've gone to www.orcwarclans.com, filtered by best list, and been like, I'll take that. No, we don't want that. I think that creates a negative player experience for us. We want to know that there's an equal threat. It is a battle of skill not a battle of Google search
Yeah.
between us. But before I get too deep into that one, Ben, what about yourself? The
Um,
meta flow.
I think it's like what you said. It comes in cycles. I think, some people have been playing this army forever. Like Stormcast Eternal guys, chances are they've been playing it for a long time and they've been good, and then everything else gets better around them, and then maybe AOS 4 brings everything which was flagging behind back up, and there's a loyalty there, and often overlook things. It's like I've tried to move away from, not tried, I've experimented outside my Nighthaunt, but I feel deeply rooted in taking an army which I am just losing with all the time, but I'm doing my best. I know that when I've had a game, I've tried my best with it, and I know where I've made the mistakes, but the better army, because the power level perhaps, or it just was a bad matchup. I'm trying to sort of like pin it down. The meta, some people have waited a long time for their army to be meta. It's like, good on you, Soul Blight. You've had your moments in the sun. Is that what we say, Mike? You've had your moments in the sun when the new book comes out, you're like, huh? Nighthaunt didn't get that, but hey ho, if I'm honest, I preferred the old book. And if people are going to comment, but I did like the old book. But we didn't really get our moments in the sun with it. There was like one build, and then everything else moved on. I think the problem which I have, no, is it a problem? I think it's just a different mindset. Like my mindset is fixed on, I've spent a lot of time procrastinating. I've not listened to a lot of conversations which are being had with me because I'm thinking about playing the game, things like that. And then there are people which buy an army, paint it, follow. I'm trying not to have, because it's a rotating hobby. Some people might have that mindset where they're like, they were good for a bit. I'm now going to move on, sell it on eBay, get the next army because they like competing on the top tables. Maybe it is that they like the top tables and that's where they want to be. That's cool. I think it's all people are different, right? So, what I don't necessarily have patience for, and it's nice to hear, I've heard it from other tables when people have gone, oh, I've just beaten that list. And you're like, I wonder why. Maybe someone's got the list from an online source and not piloted it correctly because they are, I think this is what we're moving on to, Mike, right? When people are not knowing how to use it and then being disappointed with it because they're not using it properly, because they're not rooted in their army itself. Have I just ranted? Have I just been...
No. You made lots of sense there. No.
Yeah, you touched on my experiences with Khorne. Like Khorne were not in a good place at all for a very long time. When I picked up Khorne, they were already in a bad place. I think I went to Leicester GT, and some players in one of the teams, I forget which team, really nice guys, came over to me and they looked at my table and said, "Oh, you're the one Khorne player." And that was kind of my experience. Everywhere I went, there was me, or that's probably like a Bloodthirster builds, and I was still learning Khorne at that point. Then we got our new book. Phenomenally strong. Although I had a rough time getting into it. Well, it took me time to learn it. So got a 3-2 because I had to deal with a what's it called? The Chaos Spawn build with a Beast of Chaos, which is just a nightmare to deal with. But we got very, very strong. Then I went to Quest of Champions, and I took a bad list, but still performed quite well for me because of the 2 Skull Cannons. With that list had 3 Khorne armies came top 3. And I know one of those players has been playing Khorne a very long time as well. So we do have these flows, and I benefited from that flow of Khorne. I have suffered from that benefit with Skaven, who got a 2.5 book, and we got no real change in our thing. But to what you say, Bennett, I think is when the word meta is being used, we are talking about meta armies, but there is sometimes a person has a meta armies on a top table because they are a very, very good player. Look at the Trollhammer guy. I forget his name. I don't think you're ever watching our videos, but I am sorry I've forgotten your name. In the old Giz book, he was winning tournaments with trolls. Now, no one is going to be saying that that's a meta army. Because it's not. It's a 25% win rate book. But he had, with his talent, he got through. how many people picked up a troll army and could not get that far because he was just and continues to be just a phenomenally talented player who has learned that army and all the minutiae that comes with that army. So that's what I agree with you, Ben. Like when you see it, it's not enough to pick up a list, put it onto a table, and assume it'll do well. You need to have some skill. There are people which we would refer to as meta chasers who do jump around. I know there's someone at the club who's not a nuke, but there was a couple of like 3 months where they were putting their toes into Age of Sigma, and every time he came with an unpainted Vanguard box of whatever was the latest release, and I didn't know until I got to OBR, and I was like, no one in their right mind picks up an OBR army before the latest book. So it's like that kind of tourism. I think all players are kind of like that. But for me, I think it comes from psychology. We want to play people. When you're at our level, you're not winning anything. You want to be playing people who are putting the same amount of effort as you. So when you sit across the table from someone who's not putting in effort, it's just lazy. And it's like, come on, let me fight someone who's passionate. I love Khorne. I love my rats. I want to be put across someone like you guys, Ben. Ben, look at the weekend. We're both there, 2 armies we love, and we're clashing them into each other. And it's fun because we both put a lot of effort into trying to get and put all those lists. And me and you talk about lore all the time about what comes into it. And maybe that is a middle table perspective. And it changes at the upper table. Because they are, as you say, Ben, the tournament players are there to win trophies. We're there and we have a different perspective. And I'm sure there's other players like painters who turn up who don't care where they finish. It's at lunchtime when they put their on the table. And we're not going to say there's a meta painting list. If you want to get the painting, here's what you do: is purple all over the place. Paul, have you got what you've heard me and Ben talk about? What are your thoughts around that kind of?
Yeah, I think you're right, and ultimately also comes down to the individuals themselves. The one thing we've discovered, I'll quickly just hit on it. There is a thing out there that is called psychographic profiling. It was developed around the Magic the Gathering card game. Yeah, nerd alert here, guys. And basically, there's 3 categories that they kind of established of people who would play the card game, and it actually fits really well into the Age of Sigmar scene as well. And ultimately, it's named after just 3 names. It's called the Timmy, the Johnny, and the Spike. The Timmy of the individuals is someone who are deep rooted into the lore. They're looking for the fun. They're looking for those moments where they potentially could do something devastatingly bad, but ultimately they're there, and if they lose, and they're not so worried about it. The Johnny of the players is someone who will sit in front of their AOS books. They'll have 2 or 3 of them open, and they will tech list like hell. They'll do 7, 8, 10, 12 lists, really just swapping bits and pieces here and there just to see what will work, play it out on the boards and really see what they are, to see what they can maximize with all the synergies. A Spike player is ultimately what we would be classing as the meta player here, where they will find a list that will promise them the best, most accurate outcome guaranteed when they start rolling dice. And so a Spike player will be someone who is adamant that the army that they're going to take will do what they want, when they want, and how they want. So with that in mind, it really quickly shows into the individuals who do play this that meta players are quite often your Spikes, and perhaps even edging into the Johnny side of the psychographic profiling. And very rarely you would actually find a Timmy player perhaps picking up a meta list or tracking down and playing meta lists, because it's not something that's for them, unless you have one of those blue moon moments where it's an army they really enjoy, and then it just so happens that that army does become kind of meta or perhaps broken. And that's something that I avoided myself. When I went back to Gloomspite Gitz, previously I had a full Squig army built up. I had the Hoppers, I had the Mangler Squigs, the Squig Herd, the whole caboodle. It's been on my shelf for a couple of years. New book comes out, and I'm like, yes, get to play it. Then I discovered that everything Squig related was essentially classed as meta and was kind of really painful to play against. I didn't pick them up. I left them on the first on the shelf. because I didn't want to be a meta player. So in that instance and everything, it almost comes across as well that there's some people who may not want to play meta lists, and I think you'll find there'll be more of the Timmy players in this, but ultimately the people who you see top tabling with these meta armies, and it doesn't take long for an army to become meta. It only takes some couple of individuals who are well known to take it onto these tournament scenes. It gets read out on perhaps the Honest Wargamer or reviewed on Goonhammer, and people go, look what they've done. Perhaps I can do that. And like you were saying, Michael, so long as they are a confident individual, they can easily pick the lists off the net and go ham with it. So yeah, it's a very vast topic of conversation.
You touched on something quite important there, that you said that you're not a meta player. And maybe one of the issues with the term, at least in my opinion, is that the scripture should be dualistic. There should be two. There are off meta players as well. I would say I'm an off meta player. When I pick up my Skaven, I'm purposely picking him up because, as I said, I was talking to Richie, I'm like, I don't like playing on the meta. It's not because I look down on the meta. I've run meta corn lists at all. There's nothing wrong with that. But playing off meta tends to be more fun because you're discovering. Like, it's not so much about I want to go to the top tables and I want a trophy. It's like I want to find something cool that exists that no one else has found. It's that exploration, and that is worthy of a category item, because if we just have meta, we kind of create this dismissive concept. Oh, that's them over there. But we need something that says that they can say, oh, they're off meta players. Like, it's a different way of playing this hobby. All approaches to hobby are equal, guys. If you're for someone you've come across this stream, it's popped up in your YouTube sections, and it says, what do we mean by meta? And you have just started, and you just picked up your first Vanguard bot. You may not know it, but you actually might be a secret meta player because that's what you enjoy, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah,
win trophies. That's celebrate in the middle. We're celebrating. Like, how many times have we had conversations at a table where something weird just happened? I had when I played Sensor Bearers, I rolled 50 dice. I got no sixes, and we were both sat there looking at each other like, what is happening? Well, it was a significant amount. I called Kieran over to have a look and like, look at this. So I think that's maybe part of the conversation that's missing in the area at the moment, is that until we talk about what the other play styles are, like you say, the Timmys and the Jays, and say, right, that's off meta. It's about discovery. It's about building. It's about inventing. And it's about losing. It's hard to have an open conversation about what is meta. Before I ask my next question, Ben, any thoughts around that?
No, I'm just reflecting on what Paul was saying. I mean, we're talking amongst one another. Paul, I met you based on the level of which we play. Jason, I met based on the level of which we play. We're just like-minded individual gamers, which obviously have a certain play style. I would say I'm very Timmy. I'm mostly entertaining the kids' table, but there's good company down there because there is like a level of seriousness. Also, I don't like to conform. So if someone goes, oh, this is really good, I'll be like, not interested. I'm terrible. Like, I've never once run the Scarlet Doom where that was actually winning tournaments. I was like, no, I'm a salmon. I'm going to swim upstream. So I've always done the opposite. And yes, I've been to a tournament and lost all 5 games because I thought it was a good idea. But no, I lost 4 games and won 1. I have been to a tournament and lost all 5 games. That was the London GT where I discovered the term meta. Yeah, that was an eye opener, and thought I've got to get good, but not get good to the point where I'm just meta chasing. It's find something which feels right. Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah. The people which you meet are often a reflection of where you currently compete at, and it's quite nice. Yeah.
It's a really great point. You do end up at the tables with the people who are like-minded, because you have those conversations. Like, we're all in like we're the bottom half, and we're having those conversations about, oh, what's the army you bought? I bought 5 Tree Lords, and I just wanted and loads of Wild Lords. I keep jumping everything around. It's like, is it working? Oh, it's like, no. It's like those things. and I think you can tell because sometimes you meet people who are spike players but are not having a good tournament, and they aren't happy in the bottom half, and you can tell, and that's because they're not only are they not performing on the tabletop, they're also not around people who they can have conversations with about it. Because they can't be like, I bought 12 Vanguard, I just can't kill anything. Because we're all like, why did you bring 12 Vanguard? You know, there's loads of other stuff you could have in there. Bring a Vortex piece, bring something else. And that must be quite frustrating for them because in the top tables, that's when you're talking about efficiencies. How do you guarantee your rolls? Like, you don't want re-rolls. You want to be hitting on twos as much as possible. You want to make your charges. And those conversations across it change from the top table meta conversations to the mid-table off meta conversations to the bottom table. Oh my God, what's happened here?
Can I just add to that? Like when I took a really cool idea on my head, I'm talking about the Quicksilver Dead mic. When on paper it made so much sense. What I do is I take 40 ward strippers, and then all day I was paired against nothing with a ward. I was like, along the way, I met some awesome people, and they were like, "This is actually really quite funny." Yeah, I was like, but yeah.
Like, no one likes losing. Like, that's just not human nature. Like, just because you get in, you're like, oh man, that just went badly. But you also tell, Paul, you can attest, my Slade of Darkness army. I am an off-meta player, and when I was just not having fun, I was like, this is just boring. Like, this is the worst. Like, I would take getting trashed. I have never had a bad game I have not enjoyed losing with Khorne or Skaven. I had tight ones I've been frustrated because I'm like, well, just roll some dice differently. That's different. I always got to end with a smile on my face. Skaven especially, it's just like, hey, I blew up myself. You didn't even need to play against me. So yeah, and that is difficult. Yeah, we try things, it goes wrong. That's part of it. But I do think there is a dualism that needs to be explored more about these player profiles and understanding them until we get away from just saying everyone up there is wrong because they're winning, and everyone's down there wrong because they're not being efficient. I think it's going to move on. It does beg the question though of broken armies, which I hate, and I do not think they are positive for the game at all. Now, when I say a broken army, what I mean is it's not an army that is good or strong or well meaned. I mean an army that utilizes rules that are clearly not meant to be. So, we had an errata for the teleporting zombie dragons. It could be an example. It's not a particular example. The particular example I'm talking about is a fleshly of course army who are summoning the warbands. And I had a play against someone who said before we started, this army's broken and Games Workshop will fix it soon. And what's the response to that? It's like, then why did you bring it? Like, you're clearly just here to make it horrible for everybody else. That there's something you clearly know does not exist in this realm. It's not exist in this game. Is if I turned up to a game for Monopoly and I'd bought my Scrabble pieces and I'm like, who can spell the most words? It's like, that's not the game. That's not what we're trying to do here. It's like, oh no, it's fine. I've got a golf club from a Jenga tournament next week. It's all good. It's like that. Those aren't the rules. As spiritually meant in spirit, and unfortunately, I've had a couple of cases where people have we've been in that situation where you're now dealing with something that's a negative experience across because you know you can't win because they're not playing by the same rule set as you are on the table. Funny, the two cases I had, both people were nice people. Well, no, the three armies I'm thinking of in my head, all enjoyable games, but the tabletop experience was ruined from the start. So I'll throw it to you, Paul. Experiences of broken armies or thoughts on broken armies.
See, like there's a term that would go. If people are watching this, like if they're fairly new to the AOS game and everything, there's a term that is out there called NPE or non-player experience. And that ultimately kind of really ties in well with broken armies or the mentality of broken armies. At the moment, you could consider the new Slaanesh book to be a true NPE experience. And the reason why it is because it doesn't let you play with your army the way you want to. that is quintessentially at the moment one of the books that you won't enjoy playing against, because at the beginning you see the army on the other side and you go, oh, that's cool, and they get this thing called temptation dice. If you take the temptation dice, they then start building what's known as depravity points. Sounds absolutely fine until you're about turn 3, round 3 or round 4 in, and you come to the point when you realise that the opponent, the whole Slaanesh army, is now on a -1 to hit. They've got a 5-up ward save and 6s to wound, do mortal wound in addition to everything else across their whole entire army, and that's not taking into account any further minuses to hit, minuses to wound, and it really kind of detracts from your enjoyment. I haven't had too much of an experience when it comes to NPE. I've lost 2 armies, meta armies, and I think that's probably the downside of it, because it's not necessarily a bad thing to be a meta player, like you said. That's one thing I want to kind of really underline here. It's not bad being meta player. It's just the other side of it is how you actually feel your opponent is taking it. And the problem is like, if I see that on the list, I check my next opponent and they're like, oh look, it's KO with 40 Thunderers and 3 frigates. I'm like, I will turn to the people around me and I'm like, oh, yeah, this is going to be a 2-round game. And you kind of it takes more time to actually set up your miniatures than it is to actually play the game on the board. And it's the frustration factor, I think, that ultimately is the thing that kind of sinks in. Now, if you are a meta player versus a meta player, you kind of almost accept it and just move on from it. Whereas if you're perhaps a Timmy player who's there for the fun of it, who wants to try and establish some sort of decorum with their miniatures, who wants to try and get that ultimate smash happen moment, to get shot off the board in 2 turns, you kind of come away, it's like, wow, great. But not only is it a loss, it's a really crappy loss almost. So yeah, that's I've been very fortunate, and that probably also works in the premise that I've never been top tables that often. I think I've only ever had one experience where I've been true top table, but where I've been so low, I've never really come upon these armies that kind of are meant to be top tables. I just think that ultimately that is the twist to meta playing, is that you're not necessarily considering the opponent you're playing against and what they're experiencing when you put your models on the board.
Yeah, and that is something that needs to be more pronounced. Is that it's not only a 2-player game, it's a 2-player experience. Luckily, most we play round robins, I think it's the right term, where off meta is split quite quickly, and you're right. Like 2 many players don't care. That's for them. That's what the game is. But it's about managing. This can kind of be resolved with having open conversations with the other player. Like I've had before I start with Corn, Ben, when we play this weekend, it's like Murderlust, move, Bloodstoker. It's like there's a 16-inch range here. Be careful. But when I started my old Corn list, they're like, okay, can you tell me what could happen? It's like those Bloodthirster with the right buffs going can move 24 inches, and he can have 7 attacks, 6 to wound, and he can do 4 mortal wounds. It's like always be aware, because Corn can be NPE, like the old Murderlust. Every time I got told off for it, torn by a TO, because no, it was about value. I was about to do, but into the hero phase, they pick a battle tactic, and it's something like, I'm going to kill that guy for an objective. It's like, wait, before you pick that, I have 4 blood type points. I can move, I could drop something on you, I could unbind your spell. It's like, don't pick magical dominance because I've got 2 blood type points, because there's nothing worse than gotchas, which is a big part of that. And that's something I think hopefully you'll find in the mid tables, and we should be encouraging in mid table play, is tell people. If anyone's ever watched MasterChef US, is this a weird thing? There's a guy, there's an Italian guy who won, I think season 4. There's a part in the competition where someone has run up butter, forgot to pick up butter from somewhere. The idea being you have to get your ingredients and run to your desk. So he turns to one of her opponents and says, can I buy a bottle of butter from you? And the person says, no, we're in competition, why do I give you butter? Then the eventual winner was like, yeah, I'll give you butter, and just gave her butter. then when he was talking, he was like, "I'll beat you in the final." It's like if you're good enough, it doesn't matter then what your rules. You should be good enough to win anyway. And that's the way I go into it. It's like I would tweet everything once about Murderlust. I'll stop you picking bad tools so I can automatically unban them. If I can't beat you fairly, I shouldn't be able to beat you. That's that conversation that you need to have. Ben, for you, any experience with broken armies or armies that you're just like, no?
Lots.
He plays me every year.
no, not to say broken armies. I've had like really bad pairings, like the worst possible types at the most critical times in, let's say, tournaments. Ones where you're just like, there's nothing I can do here based on the nature of what I've got with the Nighthaunt, high volumes of attacks, no rend, all those kind of things. There's been times where I've just like, I've not got an answer to it. I've played my skin off. I've thought about, have I played every single move as best as I could? And yes, you may be making one or two mistakes. There's been those kind of games a lot, especially when you're down the bottom with like the Nighthaunt, the way they were. The old book, for some reason, I seem to have more success with Nighthaunt at the old book in the last week of their battle tome than I have had with this latest one. I think there's only been one time where I thought that's broken, but it probably isn't. It's probably just the way it was with what I was running at the time, and it was a really good fight all the way up to turn 4, backwards and forwards, and it's like, who's got it? And it was a really, really good fight. And then something happened turn 5, everything on my board just got deleted. I was like, everything just blew up. I wasn't going to say names, but yeah, it just basically, yeah.
Kieran, you cheat.
No.
He's not. Let's be very clear on that.
It was a damn good fight. I mean, we're both hitting magic, and it just got to the point where everything blew up. Nagash went, all its support, just everything, all terrain, and I was like, one of the best games I've played up to that point.
Yeah.
I was like,
And that did eventually get nerfed. There was the Seraphon Chalk Bomb, if I'm right.
Was that
where
2
he
days?
could send spells. Yeah.
Like 2 days later, after I did a full Eminem Stan letter to Games Workshop.
The thing is kind of weird as rules evolve, these gaps appear, and then people think about then Games Workshop like that's not what we mean, and they nerf it, which comes back to the flow conversation. And that sometimes also in video gaming, it's exploits. Those things have been overlooked that you can take advantage of. Maybe the Chalk Bomb wasn't an exploit, like you said earlier, Paul, about power creep, and it is to get sales. My not conspiracy is that I think Games Workshop do it, sell it, and then nerf it. And that's how they give it a power creep. Because, well, I'm not saying it's not power creep. Everything flows around. And the rules are changing, but it does seem to be. Because I can't imagine a play test and go like, "Here's an exploit," and Games Workshop go, "Oh, but keep that in there, and we'll look at it in about a week and a half," and then be like, "No, I can't have that anymore. Now you've bought it all." Ben, so
based on today's point score, shall I be able to pick up even more Soulblight for cheap on eBay?
Yeah, you got to on your 4,000 Nighthaunt list.
Yeah, like a 2,000 point army. Yeah, just now 3,000. I don't know.
I think you're right though, Michael. With that is we have to remember that Games Workshop is a company, profit-making company, and ultimately they will never be able to say that they don't incentivize power creep. Their biggest product on their range, 40k, is 9th edition, stank of high heaven of it, to a point where when Leagues of Otan came out, 7 days afterwards, they had to physically go onto a video and say, "Sorry guys, we made a mistake." That's where it kind of, power creep, just kind of emphasised right there. And you're right, the Games Workshop, I don't know if they do it deliberately, But they do it in a way of they have to promote the book to make them look better. Look at the new Cities of Sigmar book, not even released just yet. And I've listened to 2 podcasts so far, which have kind of explained if you do X, Y, and Z, you're not going to get touched by the opponent because you'll clear them off the board. And I think you're right. There's possibly an element of Games Workshop doing that to incentivize sales. And it's like, okay, we've got our money. Now let's make it a bit fairer for the people on the board. The other side of it, though, unfortunately, is that Games Workshop just doesn't invest enough into gameplay testing.
Yeah.
They did it for a while, and unfortunately, because, well done, guys, on this one, because rules were getting leaked left, right, and centre, Games Workshop put huge shutters down. They were like, no more. If any game testing will now be done in-house.
Yeah.
And then it's like, yeah, it seems all right when we're playing it as they want us to play it. Put it out to a public of millions, and you will have people who are like, well, I'm not playing like you want to. I'm going to be the bully of the game, and I'm going to take 4 Iron Blasters in my Ogre's army. Not that we ever expected you to take that, but I'm going to do it. And so I think there's also that side of it, though, the Games Workshop, that there is a power creep in it. It's probably not as epidemic as it was in 40k, but there's certainly a slight increase going on. And you can see that between Stormcast, where they stand in their books, and perhaps where cities stand now with their book. And you can see that the benefits and the huge bonuses that Stormcast were experiencing, people going, oh my God, look what they get. And now Cities of Sigmar get that perhaps on their basic troops. You know, it just shows that there has been a gradual incline going up as we've gone through the 25 factions or so.
Yeah, I don't quite understand the Games Workshop. Why would anyone take 3 of these ludicrously overpowered 200-point models? It's like, I'm gonna take 6. It's like they have this weird idea of their customer who has infinite money and no common sense.
Yeah.
Here we go. So yeah, just to bring it around about Woeful is obviously if you're a new player to the tournament, you're going to hear the term, you need to understand what meta is, and you need to understand kind of who you are. If you're a meta player or you're an off meta player, both are fine. We will still talk to you at tournaments. We want you to win medals. I've got my bronze medal, so I don't need to win anymore. That's enough for me to be happy. But it is also about those conversations aren't just about your army. It's about how you can kind of conduct yourself at the table. Also be mindful of people who aren't happy in your area because they might be meta players. Reach out, talk to them, let them talk about how much I hate their list. Right, that little community of stuff. But it is interesting. It's just I don't like hearing when people they talk about another player and they're just meta. Like that's not fair. That's dismissive. The game is a tournament. They're trying to win it. Like, understand that if they're broken, slag them off. I'm all for that. Then we can be poised as a whole with everybody. Don't be. But we can be. So in those cases, I think it's just an important conversation for early play because you will hear that and it will sometimes be used negatively and it may impact yours. If you are like, oh, what? So if I win matches, am I going to be seen as a meta player? And then I won't be welcome, or I'll be alienated from people I've been talking to all day. Like that should never be the case. You'll find your people at a tournament anyway. But just wanted to have that conversation. And then other conversations. We spoke about psychological profiles, which Paul, you'll be talking about in the future. And we welcome any other suggestions from anyone about things they'd like to talk about, have us talk about, or give us opinions on. Because there may be someone in the comments who completely disagrees with us and thinks meta is the correct way of playing, or that we should be dismissing meta players, which you shouldn't be. This is not the right place for you to be a negative Nancy.
Yeah.
Any last thoughts from either of you on meta or anything about we haven't discussed so far?
Ben?
I think as long as you're having fun,
Yeah,
do whatever the hell you want, even if you are top table, and that's what it takes. Are you having fun? Cool.
yes,
I think
absolutely.
what you said earlier, be considerate of your opponent as well. Just check on them, see whether they're having fun or not. We've all have we all been on the receiving end of like a really unfun?
Yep.
And we've had opponents where they're doing it, and you're like, I remember the classic one, Mike. Apologies if I swear. Some guy saying, "Well, you bought a shit army." I was like, but it was a bad pairing.
Right.
What
Yeah.
was nice, the moral of the story was at the end of the tournament, I ranked higher than him, despite getting absolutely spanked horribly off the board. So take the moral high ground, be nice, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah. He won't know
Enjoy it.
himself. He won't know who he is, and he won't watch this. So, Dr. Snake, you're out there. Go. Paul.
Yeah, I think we summed it up really well, to be honest. And like Ben said, just be considerate of your opponent. Like the number of times when I have played Fast Slayers, I love Gotrek. I love him for the lore. I love him for the capability that he provides. But every time I put him on the board and I'm explaining my army, I hold him up and I say, I do apologize for this miniature and what he's about to do. And I try to warn them, and it's like the number of times I said, look, he's going here because he looks like all the other dwarfs on my army. This is Gotrek. And when opponents are getting close to him, it's like I do try to warn them. And then when he does go in, and as he's like chopping down these huge creatures, like, oh, I get to go again. There goes your general. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. It's not my fault. It's Gotrek. But I would say that just, be considerate of your opponent. And ensure that they do understand that you're not doing it. Hopefully, you're not doing it deliberately to ruin their day. And like Ben said, just check on them. And as long as you can keep a good decorum going on the board, then you're doing everything right, being a meta player or not.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's what the key is as you say, it's all about being considerate to your opponent. Make sure you're having fun and play the way that is fun for you. And plus, there's no greater thing in the world than explaining to players all the ways that your army is broken, blood type, summoning, and then getting beaten and thinking, maybe it's a vampire as similar like what it was. Anyway, that wraps us up. It is 11 o'clock. So thank you, Paul. Thank you, Ben.
Thank
Jason,
you.
I hope your legal choppers are sorted and the dog nipping charges are dropped. If they are not, we'll see you hopefully next week. You can tell us all about it. That's live from the bottom half. Thank you very much and good night.